exactly what I was going to say, but I want to try. I'll make a few comments. I'll try and pick up on what I heard and maybe try and give you a sense of how I see the present situation and where we're, as a practitioner in this area of non-proliferation and maybe sometimes counter-proliferation, how I see this, how I see the situation developing. To my mind, and I think it's important to say, and I'm sure that Shimon did, that non-proliferation measures are to a large extent a series of political, economic, diplomatic measures, treaties, protocols, codes of conduct, supplier regimes, export controls, inspection, verification, measures that are taken to, by and large, prevent the development and spread of weapons of mass destruction. If we look at the term counter-proliferation, from my feeling and understanding of it, I would probably lean to talking about the need from the counter-proliferation area to develop new capabilities over the years that could defend against proliferants, including a preemptive military action, and essentially the full measures that are available to security establishments to prevent the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction should the previous efforts of non-proliferation fail. I think it's interesting to note that in the year 1993, which was a significant year because I changed Shimon in Washington, but beyond that was in the embassy in Washington, but beyond that was the year in which some things really, I think, were very significant happened. That year there was the Clinton Non-Proliferation Initiative, which talked about the need for regional tailor-made strategies. And you also will remember that in that year, I think it was January the 13th, 1993.
Chemical.
Sorry?
Chemical weapons.
The chemical weapons a convention was signed in Paris. And the way I see that was that, I mean, at the time, those of us who were involved, and a lot of people in this room who were involved in the discussions then, and I try and take a step back and look at it, I felt that it was kind of like some sort of rapprochement between the Israeli thinking and the American thinking in terms of the need to look at the regional context of arms control. And also there was to a certain extent, recognition on the Israeli side of the growing importance of the non-proliferation measures, even on a global scale. And indeed, during those years, I'd say that we developed our thinking in that regard. We didn't only sign the Chemical Weapons Convention in January of 1993, we also began and were engaged very heavily in the CTBT negotiations later on during those years. We became parties to the Conventional Weapons Convention. We were already party to the Geneva Protocol of 1925 regarding gas and other substances. We became members of adherents, I should say, to supply regimes, the nuclear supply groups, the MTCR, Wassenaar Group, and also the Australia Group. So in fact, actually, during these years, we actually did, though we weren't signatures to the NPT, we actually did develop a thinking, a practice of actually how to relate to the whole issue of non-proliferation from a policy point of view and in terms of our approach to various measures that were on the table. And also after that, we continued to be involved very deeply in the CTBT, in the inspection manuals that are being developed in Vienna, in the contacts that we're developing and talks on the Code of Conduct on missile proliferation. At the same time, also, as I said, there were the ACUS talks that came after the Madrid conference. I think that was also part of the sense coming from the American administration that you need a regional tailor-made strategy. And I think that this was a time where, indeed, there was a much greater convergence in the Israeli and American thinking on these particular issues. During the later decade, of the beginning of 2000 and onwards, under the Bush administration, I'd say there was much less emphasis given to non-proliferation measures, to say the least, more emphasis on the counter-proliferation side. And then in the Obama administration, we have the Prague speech, and that may bring us back to a shift back to non-proliferation. And obviously the question needs to be asked is what is the meaning from Israel's point of view? And I come back here to the title. I don't think Israel, and I think most countries, but particularly Israel, particularly in this area, and particularly given the range of security challenges that we're faced, I don't think countries have the luxury of saying that we are going to be in a mode of non-proliferation or a mode of counter-proliferation. Frankly, we're going to be, in my opinion, in a mode of having to have, literally, as Giora said in the end of his speech, the whole issue of all options being on the table. I think this is something that has been a part of our policy over the years. It was clear that in the beginning of the 80s, when we acted against Iraq, we were taking a counter-proliferation measure, and also in other events subsequently, which I won't go into, but also we still, however, must remember that there's a very important component to the idea of all options being on the table, whether they're non-proliferation or counter-proliferation. And that is that part of all those options are the diplomatic option. And we shouldn't forget it. Diplomatic, this idea has always been seen to be as a kind of veiled threat in terms of the military side of it. But it's important to remember that even today, as we speak about all options being on the table, the diplomatic option is still there, and no one has renounced that as an option, in particular with regard to the Iranian program and after the publication of the report that has just come out. And in terms of what that means as a practical issue over the next year or two, I think for the Israelis who deal with this issue in government and also the Israelis who think about this outside of the government, is that I think that over the next 2 years, we're going to be in a situation where you're going to have two major documents on the table. And the first document, obviously, is the one I've referred to, is the Iranian report by the Director General of the IEA. This very extensive report, which was prepared by the IEA with the help of 10 countries, basing itself on very wide-ranging information that wasn't available to the public domain up till now. And I think that it's given a very clear indication that you are talking of a country that was dealing with the development of a nuclear explosive device. And all the other activities that were mentioned in the report, whether it goes to the design of the weapons, the detonation mechanisms, and the Project 111, which was designed to fabricate the warhead that would be installed on the Shihab 3. All of these elements in the report which show these are not measures that were being pursued by Iran just to with some sort of civilian application. These were things, these were activities that had no other explanation other than the quest for a nuclear weapons capability. And I think this is clearly going to be a tremendous, and continue to be a tremendous part of Israeli diplomacy in the foreseeable future, in the very foreseeable future, and as time goes on. But another document that was accepted in 2010 was the NPT Review Conference, and the final document that was there. And that also put on the table an issue of the Middle East, the 2012 conference, the regional conference. There's been a tremendous amount of Track 2 activity on this. There's been the appointment of Finland as the host government, and the Deputy Foreign Minister of Finland, who will be the facilitator. And this also has generated a lot of discussion and attention, which obviously will occupy us over the years. But I think the key element that I want to make here is that there is a tremendous difference between these two documents. When I look at the amount of detail that is in the IAEA report and about the most defining nuclear threat of our time, i.e. Iran, and I look and I search in vain in the NPT Review Conference report for something that will mention Iran, something which will talk about the program which is developing, even the civilian program which is could be diverted to a military element, but nothing. And I think that the international community, when they get to the year 2015 and they have the next review conference, a lot of things can happen between now and then. But I think they'll have a very hard time explaining why did they not even mention the Iranian nuclear threat in this document when you have this document in front of you. But that, in the end, will be a question that will be looked at by academics and practitioners and everything, but in the end, we're going to have to handle it. And obviously, in that sense, we will not be, in general terms, in a situation, again, as I said, where we'll have the luxury of choosing between one sort of measure or the other. We will obviously have to keep a lot of measures on the table. The Israeli establishment that has dealt with the issue of non-proliferation and counter-proliferation has developed these measures over these years. I think our policy in these regards are much more elaborate, much more thought out than people actually think. There is a very conscious policy of Israel regarding non-proliferation. Not everything stems on being a member of the NPT. In our area, we've also had situations where 4 countries, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Iran, have been all members of the NPT. And in terms of I'm more proud of our proliferation credentials than I think anyone should be of their proliferation credentials.
Or non-proliferation credentials.
Indeed, I stand corrected. Thank you very much.